to. If I watch my children be brutally murdered in front of my eyes and my city be razed to the ground, you can bet that I won't just shut up and believe and behave like a good little citizen when you pardon the criminals that have instigated these crimes against me in the first place. You signal to me that this is a state that does not care about me, that does not care about the trauma that I went through, and I will forever harbor resentment against this state from silencing my experiences and my trauma and never giving me the justice that I deserve. The problem with the entirety of this debate is there's a general failure of imagination or examination of the average human psyche. If I have undergone warfare, civil warfare, I have had to watch my family die in front of me. It is not so simple to get someone to forget about the past. And the entirety of proposition is based on the assumption that you can lower political temperature by getting people to forget about the things that have happened to them. But it doesn't happen that easily. Just because you tell someone to forget about something, it doesn't mean it will work. And in order for any proposition, case, or impact to fly, they had to prove that to begin with. This is an extremely strong response coming from CEO that you don't get from OO, which I think immediately topples the round or the case coming from both proposition benches. And this is the problem with opening government in particular. When they hardline that you're able to resolve conflict, they fail to understand how conflict exists in the first place. Post-conflict states remain in conflict due to unsettled grievances. Political conflicts and tensions escalate when people want to campaign or push for certain ideologies that they feel that the state is currently not providing to them. This is a very important extension that self provides to you. And when you silence them, you give political capital an opportunity for despots and warmongers to come and enter the political landscape and to capitalize on the resentment and tensions that have already built up to instigate further conflict to push their narratives. This looks like, for example, the push coming from oppressive US regimes in Iraq or Syria, pushing people further towards the extreme and towards terrorism, or in the former Yugoslav states like Milorad Dodik, a right-wing populist, pushing for unnecessary secession in Bosnia and Herzegovina by villainizing the Serbian majority, because the former Yugoslav states pardoned war criminals and silenced rhetoric challenging the current Serbian majority. These are all examples, real-life examples of the case of proposition being implemented on the ground, and these are examples of them clearly failing in line with the analysis that I give you. So what should your takeaway be from this? That you cannot lower political tensions simply by silencing people. But we give you a very important even if, that is a prerequisite as well to opening ops case. That if you are able to successfully silence people and quell the political temperature, it will only be because a strong political majority has the capacity to take over the state and to silence individuals in the minority. This means that you have to implement force in order to forcefully lower political temperature. So even if you buy the idea coming from proposition that you're able to lower political temperature, it comes at the cost of very vulnerable minorities having their interests represented. And you can only buy OO's case about not being able to campaign for your rights, for example, or call out systemic disenfranchisement if you first have the analysis coming from CO that you have to put then that hardline approach to silencing minorities in the first place. So with that, we already co-opt OO's case. What is the problem then with CG? CG has far too soft of a clash, and they shoot themselves in the foot because of this. If you tell me that discourse still happens on closing government, and in the same breath, tell me that discourse is bad because it escalates conflicts and you cannot forget the past, then the rhetoric and the analysis of closing government is self-contradictory and you really can't buy any of their impacts. And I break that contradiction by saying that discourse is a good thing, but it happens only in closing opposition when you don't do what the info slide says on proposition and literally outlaw discourse and discussion of the past. So then why is discourse so important in the first place to resolve all of these tensions? This is a very important constructive point that I don't think anyone in the round besides Seth has clearly been able to explain so far. First, once you prevent historical revisionism by having facts more readily available and do not censor discussions about the past, it makes it far easier for despots and warmongers to come in with historical revisionism and specifically target certain ethnic minorities or elaborate or create conflict. But then second, when you do not pardon political criminals and war criminals, like people that were the head of the massacres in the former Yugoslav state, for example, you make it far easier for people to accept and adjust to a new regime where they can accept everyone because the people that needed to be held accountable are held accountable. On the counterfactual and proposition, when you pardon these criminals, it sends the message that the current state and the people that represent or are at the head of that state are willing to allow the crimes of the past to continue being unpunished and are therefore likely to be held accountable for the same crimes into the future by the minorities that were hurt. So if I'm a president that pardons war criminals, then these people will treat me like a person that is a war criminal. And this is a point that proposition had to contend with, and they are not able to. And then lastly, when you're able to actually talk about your trauma that you've gone through, rather than secretly hiding and telling your children about it with the fear that your government is going to persecute you for simply telling the truth, then I think that it's far easier to accept the present where my children may be gone and may have been killed, but justice was preserved because war criminals were not pardoned in the name of silencing the truth in order for justice. Before I move on, I'll take that point.
The path to reconciliation was already proven to be impossible with the proliferation of conflicting narratives. CO is wrong, it's not simply slow, it's impossible. But secondly, we proved that the best form of justice is by fixing the current situation of the people and fulfilling their concurrent needs instead of past issues.
Okay, multiple responses to that. First, if you are going to argue that you're willing to silence people in favor of lowering political tensions, then you still have to contend with the case coming from CO that the most vulnerable actors are failed on your side. They are forever silenced and they have to deal with systemic disenfranchisement. This is something that you aren't able to respond to. Second, we think that the truth is far more weaponized and narratives are conflict a lot more when historical revisionism is rampant and there is no circulation of truths to actually have like truth and reconciliation committees, for example, that create structured and centralized narratives that people can agree with. And I think even if in the short term there is some disagreement about the narratives that do exist, at least each individual population under the nation will feel like they are represented. So it is much harder to capitalize on tensions between multi-ethnic states, for example, and they're able to push politicians to govern in state, for example, without unnecessarily high tensions from unresolved conflicts from getting in the way of good governance. So if it's a debate about extents, I think the extent of discussion, truth, and the de-escalation of conflict when the truth is addressed is far better on closing opposition. So for all these reasons, I think we're the sole team to win this debate. All of the points coming from OO are prerequisite to our analysis, and we're the only ones able to successfully take it over prompt. If you don't buy our case, you can't buy OO's case either. Thank you.